You know, when I first got into the lore of Warhammer 40K, I thought the setting existed of our reality, known as the Materium, the evil hell warp where the Chaos Gods live, known as the Immaterium, and then that weird Webway dimension from the Eldar, which allows you to travel all across the galaxy in mere moments. And that was about it. 40K consists of 3 realities, in which everything happens. Now 20 years later, I realized that I was completely wrong. Everyone knows those 3 dimensions, but what if I told you that Warhammer 40K has more than 10 canon dimensions and realities? Not every single one of them spans the entire universe, but all 10 are crucial for understanding how the Grimdarkness of the far future really works. By the end of today's video, you will know everything you need to know about the 10 dimensions of Warhammer 40K. From the warp that humanity uses to travel the galaxy, the Ghostwind, where the sun-eating Catan may have originated from, all the way to the City of Dust, a pocket dimension within the realm of chaos itself, where a certain legendary custodian might be building a massive army of golden 6-winged super space marines for an incredibly dark reason. As this video has some really in-depth lore subjects, I have added an excerpt straight from the Black Library novellas and books to just about every single dimension. So instead of doing the standard LoreTuber thing of vaguely talking about random sources, you will get the information straight from the books to help you truly understand these insane realities. All that and a whole lot more in today's video. Alright, let's get into the lore. Quick note, I will use the words reality and dimensions interchangeably throughout this video. In 40K, it is unclear what the size of every dimension really is, or how interwoven it is with other layers of the setting. If it's a smaller dimension that doesn't cover at least the size of the Milky Way, I will call it a pocket dimension instead. Alright, let's begin with our own beautiful dimension, the place where birds chirp, and black holes are used as weapons, the Materium, or as some may call it, the material universe. The Materium is the dimension humanity is native to, the place ruled by the laws of nature, gravity, light, neutrons, and whatever other laws you want to apply. And while this reality is quite mundane on the surface, it is the crux from which all other dimensions spawn and interact. In a way, it acts as an overworld, like Zen in Half-Life. The Materium might seem shallow at first, but it is the place where carbon-based lifeforms come from, and in that aspect, it is completely unique. Across the universe exist countless worlds and stars. Some are burned up, others are destroyed for the laughter of thirsting gods, but many more are home to all sorts of fauna and flora. No matter the type of living being that exists in the Materium, all are held by the same laws of time, boundaries of physical space, and causality. Whether it's the wild jungles of Catachan or the irradiated deserts of Baal, life has proven to be persistent in the most extreme climates. For those sentient creatures that have formed powerful souls, their physical bodies act as a tether to reality, a vessel for their soul in the warp to be tied down and remain stable instead of being devoured. Also, by being present within the Materium, these souls have a chance to experience a reality in which they can actually interact, learn through physical touch, smell and sight, and with time, actually gain experiences that enrich their existence. In a way, it is a reality to live in, to be something in. Humanity is but one of the many species to have explored our stars, and although we once possessed incredible technology during the golden age of technology, we are far from unique in many aspects. 60 million years before we became sentient, the Old Ones were roaming all across the universe, planting life, terraforming planets, and even upgrading certain species they came across, if they were worthy of their time. Some considered the Old Ones as gods, but in reality, they were more all-powerful, but not creatures of godlike power. Instead, that role fell to the Catan, the actual gods of our reality, who might not have started here, but definitely influenced nearly everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. While the Old Ones were gods in all but name, the Catan are material gods. As we understand them, these immortal star spawns are a fundamental part of the fabric of reality. The Catan were formed from raw energies and vibrating atoms, floating across the universe as massive star clouds that consumed the stars they came into contact with. Yet much like the dark entities of the warp, the Catan also fed on the essence of those they ruled, sucking their physical and mental existence in, and devouring their life stuff to fuel their own growing forms. Yet for all the insane powers they held at this time, they supposedly were once beaten by the Old Ones, before going dormant for many millions of years. This resulted in them coming to the aid of the Necrontyr, who, after starting a war with these same Old Ones, were on the verge of losing the war in heaven. With this new alliance of Necrontyr and Catan, the Catan were given living metal bodies to finally interact with the reality around them. Yet with the powers of a god also comes hubris. During the process of biotransference, where the young dying Necrontyr race was turned into the Terminator killer robot Necrons we know today, the Catan fed on the souls of the unsuspecting Necrontyr. This betrayal would not be tolerated, and as a result, when the Old Ones were finally defeated, the Necrons turned on the Catan and shattered every single one of them. However, due to being a part of something fundamental to the Materium, the Catan could never truly be destroyed. Having fed on entire galaxies and the Old Ones, the Catan, even as shards, are the singular most powerful tools in the entire universe. And in the end, the Old Ones and the Catan shards are the only ones in the entire history of the universe who truly know all the laws and physics of what we live in. They are most likely the only beings to ever find out how our universe was formed. The Catan, Old Ones and humanity are but a tiny fraction of what dwells in the material universe. And although I could spend hours exploring the different sentient races of 40k, from powerful psychic races like the Eldar or the Nikasar, psychic polar bears my beloved, to the efficient and methodical hunters like the Kroot or Tyranids, let's keep it on dimensions. Besides all the beings, planets and physical objects strewn across our reality, our universe is also the melting pot of all tears, scars and crazy unexplainable anomalies created throughout history. From blackstone fortresses that might be leftovers from the war in heaven, to massive warp and supernova storms, and even mass disappearances like Deathhenge, our reality is filled to the brim with mysteries. I might do a mystery video one day on the lesser known reality bending anomalies. If you want to see that, let me know down in the comment section below. But to understand the universe of 40k, we also have to take a good look at the warp, the Sea of Souls, the energy mirror of our own reality, and in a way, the place where Warhammer 40k's problems originate from. And let me tell you, we know a lot more about the warp than you think we do. Whatever you choose to call it, the Immaterium is a second plane of existence that is a mirror to our own. Here, there are no laws of physics, no boundaries or rules. Its space is infinite, never-ending and wide enough to spread across the universe and beyond. Its lack of stable time and location is something incomprehensible to mortals. Every emotion felt in the Materium is a single thing of impossible abstraction, metaphor and power in the warp. Yet for a realm where such raw emotions as love and hate, ambition and despair are made real, the warp is also an emotionless void of ever-changing currents. It is ever-transforming but constantly remains the same. No natural or supernatural sense can see, smell or hear it, except through illusions of color and faces that drive men insane. This is the warp, the place where the realm of chaos is found, the Sea of Souls, the Immaterium. This is an unknowable realm where the armies of thirsting gods are locked in a conflict as old as the universe, one that can never be won. Quick side note, but the realm of chaos does not cover the entire warp, more like a couple % of it at best. The warp is a thing of illusions and speculation, but if you want to compare it to something we can actually understand, it is an infinite ocean. And just like the ocean, the warp has depth, one that stretches deep and wide. The first upper layer of the warp is the stratum aetheris, which is the shallow ways. Here is where humanity and other races travel. From the shallow ways, the light of the Astronomicon and what used to be the Pharos device can be seen and used as a lighthouse. Through the stratum aetheris, navigators can navigate the warp, and the upper layer is the easiest part to punch a hole into with warp drives and Galar fields. The second layer is the stratum profundus, which are the greater arteries, plunging deeper into the warp itself. While not impossible to travel, these arteries are best avoided by humanity, as navigating them is essentially like driving blind. The Astronomicon is but the smallest glimmer here, and is impossible to see from even the smallest distance. And finally, there is the third layer, the stratum obscurus, the deep ways. Here is where humanity's knowledge of the warp ends. Everything beyond this point is believed to be impossible. Some call this the route of terror. In the eyes of some, such as Vil, the head magister of the Axelux Navigator House, describes this deep part of the warp as moving like a living thing. It is not a mirror or parallel. When touched, it trembles. The complexity is something that makes the rest of the warp seem almost understandable. It's a realm completely separate from everything else. To go this deep into the warp, not only do you travel blind, but Galar fields simply stop working. A Galar field is essentially a bubble of reality that protects the ship from any demons trying to enter its halls. But when you delve into the stratum obscurus, even the best and strongest Galar fields immediately shut off. Navigator Vil also said that it takes the power of a tormented sun to even get past the stratum aetheris. If you string the reactors of a dozen battleships together and double their potential, it would still not be enough to enter the deep warp. The only benefit a ship or traveler would have within the deep warp is that there are no storms or currents. The violent and turbulent nature of the warp is lessened here, but without a Galar field, ships are vulnerable to the predations of demons. The warp is already a poison for mortal life. The deeper you go, the worse the poison gets. In simpler terms, and to go back to our ocean comparison, the deep warp acts in similar ways to the deepest part of an ocean. You might even compare it to the Mariana Trench, but imagine it had no bottom, where the water pressure gets so high, even our highest tech super resolution cameras would get crushed in an instant. If you want a deeper look at the warp, where I cover every detail on how your soul connects to it, how the warp layers actually look like in the lore, and, honestly, how it really functions, go watch my deep warp video. Link will be in the description. But moving on from the realm of demons, chaos gods and war parasites like the enslavers are really cool, but let's take a look at the Webway, the one other place they try to invade at all times besides our own reality. The dimension sandwiched between reality and the warp, the beach between the shore and the ocean. Sometimes referred to as the labyrinth dimensions, the Webway is a dimension consisting of arterial pathways that stretch through both the Materium and Immaterium. In a sense, it sits right between the two other dimensions, but unlike both, it is an artificial creation created by the Old Ones. Once, the Webway was intended to be a highway stretching across the entire universe. This great creation was intended for the children of the Old Ones to form a universal society, trade and connect. This dream would sadly never come to fruition due to the war in heaven that I mentioned earlier. Although the Old Ones initially had the upper hand against the Necrontyr because of the Webway, this advantage would eventually lead to their downfall. When the Webway was breached through the Dolmen Gates, which had been created by the Necrons and one of the Catan, their own pathways were turned against them, allowing Necron forces to rapidly overwhelm them. With the Old Ones gone, the Eldar have greedily guarded the Webway for over 60 million years, and in their care, it has fallen into absolute ruin. The Webway is still truly massive, and it is said that only the Eldar god of mischief, Chagarak, has walked all of its paths. Before, during, and after the fall of the Eldar, many of them called the Webway their home, but few of them have been as persistent and survivable as the Drukhari of Komorrah and the Chagarak followers known as the Harlequins of the Black Library. From the Webway, the Drukhari launched their countless raids across the galaxy, appearing and disappearing with loot and prisoners. While the Drukhari work only for sinister ambitions, the same cannot be said for the Harlequins. The Chosen of Chagarak are practically the only Eldar still working to maintain the Webway. They work with diligence to ensure demonic incursions are short-lived and cannot collapse important pathways. Yet guarding the Black Library, which is apparently an entire craft world placed within the Webway, remains one of the biggest duties. The vast repository of knowledge held within the library is paramount to them and their god Chagarak. But even now, after millions of years of degradation, entire wars being fought inside the Webway, fundamental tunnels lost or collapsed, the Webway has remained one of the safest and fastest ways to travel the galaxy. The Dolmen Gates of the Necrons were initially intended just to breach the Webway and fight the Old Ones. The Necrons themselves, at times, still use these gates to travel the stars, essentially borrowing the Webway. Webway gates may take many forms, but are most commonly formed from psychically charged raid-bone arches that project between them a shimmering portal large enough for a full-grown Eldar to pass through. Some are far larger, hanging suspended in space through which entire fleets, or even a single craft world, could enter the Webway. The efficiency of the Webway is such that even the Emperor wanted to make use of it. His Webway project would tragically be ruined right before the Horus Heresy, when it was breached by Magnus, who did something wrong. This breach allowed endless hordes of demons to roll in, and cost the life of thousands of custodies and millions of human lives to keep at bay. Yet even with a breach in the Webway, human Webway cities were being constructed. But what was the Emperor's plan here? Was he even succeeding in taking over the Webway? Let's take a quick look at what Vulcan thinks about the human Webway project, which also gives us a ton of information on what the Webway is actually like, as seen in Echoes of Eternity. The walls of the Imperial Webway, where he'd emerged after running through the portal into the throne room, were rigid frames on circuit-threaded Martian metal, fused to various alien materials and cultured psychoplastics. He recognized his father's vision in this blend of human and alien technology. The distant past bolted and fused to the present, for the sake of an imperfectly understood future. It grieved him to know it had all failed so utterly. Horus had much to answer for, as did Magnus. Vulcan was a smith, a shaper, a maker. He knew the craft of creation, how to bring artistry to bear along seams of inspiration, working with the materials, not against them, creating through a process, a weave of exploration and imagination. Yet the amalgamation around him rang wrong to his senses. This was something jerry-rigged, erected against the grain, woven outside the seams, using half-wrong approximations of the right materials. It worked, but it worked poorly. There had been an end goal in mind, but only the most ragged ability to reach it. Vulcan didn't doubt his father's ambitions or the worthiness of the Emperor's ultimate goal, but the craftsman in him felt ill at ease with the improvised genius of the Webway's imperial portions. Human ingenuity was stark and flawed, almost tumorous in this dimension. It made for an ugly union. Without the Emperor's endless maintenance, without the constant flow of the Emperor's psychic will, the Mechanicus sections were already crumbling, rotting and falling away into the abyss where metaphysics went to die. Even without the damage from Magnus's treachery, it is all so forced, so rushed. It hurt him to admit, but that was the impression it imprinted upon his artisan's heart. Necessity had surely played its part, but the result was undeniable. In conclusion, the Webway is something alien, something so complex, ancient Terran humans could be forgiven for thinking it's simply part of the warp, as in a lot of ways, it might as well be magic, instead of actual technology. But technology does get you very far in Warhammer 40K, even allowing you to create and spawn pocket dimensions as you need, the greatest example being the Necron dimensional pockets. Necrons have mastered many aspects of technology, but perhaps the most interesting is their capability to create their own dimensional pockets. Many tomb worlds and strongholds are way larger on the inside than the outside. When you enter, you might be confused. This should have been a cave. How is it an energy labyrinth the size of the galaxy all of a sudden? Most of these are used for storage, for power production, or, more often than not, war. Some cryptechs are known to use this technology to disappear in the middle of a battle. Sometimes, lords use it to bring in extra reinforcements. But most commonly across the forces of the Necrons, dimensional pockets are used by the Trademarks to relentlessly hunt their foes. These tools are powerful, and when harnessed to their full potential, make it almost impossible to fight Necrons. There is, of course, one exception. To the demons of the warp, these pocket dimensions are just another flavor of existence, to be corrupted and devoured. Although these dimensional pockets are, well, pockets, they do resemble the Webway in being artificially created. In a way, you can see it as a bag of holding from Dungeons & Dragons. But to give you an idea of how large one of these dimensional pockets can be, let's take a look at Twice Dead King Ruin, where Dennett, master of Necron monoliths, considers whether he should spawn in his entire army or not.
Unless,
croaked Dennett, who somehow was still awake, and the whole chamber turned to face him.
Unless I summon forth the monoliths,
said Dennett, raising a finger in emphasis, and several faceplates across the chamber dipped to the floor in shame. Alas, lamented the strategic submind, which had been just as hopeful as Oltix that the ancient commander might break free from his befuddlement. The monoliths, of course, were not an option. The war engines had been a gift from the Silent King himself, a full century of them, awarded to Dennett, along with the honorary title of Master, in acknowledgement of the victory at Iteras. But Dennett's ataxia had begun to set in even before the Great Sleep, and he had developed an obsession with the idea that his trophies would be stolen from him. In a fit of paranoia, he had locked the monoliths in a sealed dimensional appendix, under multiple seals of encryption, to keep them safe throughout the ages. Naturally, when he had awoken, the keys were entirely gone from his mind. The monoliths and the legions within them were doomed to sleep forever beyond time's reach. Time and decay had brought a sort of mercy, however, as Dennett had forgotten even their loss, and experienced periodic swells of pride and rapture when he remembered Zarek's gift. In a way, whatever else he lost, Dennett would always have his monoliths, and nobody, not even callous Necron lords, wanted to be the one to tell him otherwise. So yeah, Dennett has 100 monoliths hidden away in a pocket dimension, just in case someone wants to steal them. For this excerpt, it is pretty clear that the Necrons have as much control over these as they want, which, essentially, could allow them to make a galaxy-sized pocket dimension if they so required it. But there is one dimension, or some might say basement of reality, that even the Necrons are too scared to interact with. Let's take a look at the Ghostwind. If Necron dimensional pockets are akin to the Webway, then the Ghostwind is their form of the warp. The Ghostwind is something much more than the previous dimensions we covered. It is a meta-reality at the very bottom of all of existence. It is a universal abstract which is both nothing and everything at the same time. This is where the flayed ones go to travel across the galaxy. Their insane minds only need to imagine their destination in the Ghostwind and move to it. The Ghostwind most prominently features in the novel Twice Dead King Reign, where the cryptech Mentep explains it like this to Lord Oltix.
So the fleet which uses it will drop into another reality and move parallel to this one, like the Unclean and the Imperium. Categorically not. No, that loathsome magic remains blessedly out of the reach of our kind, in one of the few true boons our nature offers us. No, the Ghostwind drops a vessel, or vessels, to a place where reality itself is an impossible concept. No.
Mentep goes on to explain that for him to make Oltix fully understand the Ghostwind, it's going to take too much time, as they were already on the verge of being destroyed by the Imperium. But what is it like to enter the Ghostwind? Well, thankfully, we do get to experience that, as seen in Twice Dead King Reign. The great ship Acrops passed into the Ghostwind without so much as a whisper of displaced energy. Even the fading of Carnotite's blood-red darkness took place so subtly that Oltix's ever-vigilant optic arrays missed the change entirely. In the end, he only knew the transition had happened at all some seconds after it had finished, when he noticed just how silent the void had become. There were no stars visible beyond the viewports of the bridge, but that was only the start of the emptiness. To the Necron's senses, the void was a loud place. It rumbled with the baritone call of gravity wells, shivered with quantum turbulence, and even in the most desolate places was parted from time to time by the shriek of radiation from distant stars. Here, though, there was nothing. According to the external thermoceptors, the temperature beyond the hull hovered so close to absolute zero that any heat detected could well have been a measuring error, which was saying a lot, given the precision of Necron instruments. If there had been a single atom to be found in this boundless dark, it would have lacked the energy even to hold electrons to its core. But there were no atoms out there. There was no matter at all. Darkness made visible, thought Oltix, remembering the phrase from one of Mentep's endlessly quoted homeworld epics. Like Amhed's carapace, he saw now, as his recognition array retrieved what refination damaged images it could from the moment when he looked directly into the Warlock. For all the unfathomable complexity of science with which Mentep had cracked it open, this was a brutally simple place. It was so stripped down, so abjectly barren, that Oltix even fancied he understood why Amhed had sneered at the idea of calling it a place at all. It was nowhere in the most profound sense, the nothingness which lay not just in the cracks between dimensions, but in the cracks between the cracks, and since it was nowhere, Oltix figured, perhaps it could be anywhere too. But the king of Iltakas was no philosopher and saw little point in postulating. The one thing he was sure of was this: for all the reasons his people had disliked the sea, and subsequently the void too, he despised the Ghostwind. The Necrontyr had been a people of land and of sun, and their deathless successors were beings with literal star stuff at their cores. This place was anathema to everything they had been. The Ghostwind is a place where some technologies work and others do not. The most advanced technology of the Necrons did not just break down, but just simply refused to work. Communication is limited to simple radio waves. Even their reanimation protocols could not function. Death within the Ghostwind is unescapable. But I have a theory on the Ghostwind, as it is quite a recent addition to the lore of Warhammer 40K. The main thing that stands out to me is the apparent connection to the Flayed Ones. Flayed Ones are Necrons suffering from a disease that turns them insane, thirsting for flesh and blood, and slowly malforms their necrodermis bodies into gowned feral monsters. This disease was a parting gift from Landugor, the Flayer, who cursed the Necrons when they shattered him. If a Catan dies or gets shattered, do parts of them go back to the Ghostwind? Is that why the Flayed Ones can enter it by will alone? What if, and hear me out, this is the place where the Catan truly originate from? Instead of being born by the Big Bang, or simple gas clouds in reality turning sentient, the Catan are periodically created in the Ghostwind, and then were sent up into the normal reality to siphon power back into the basement. Even the Necrons fear it beyond reason. No demon has ever entered it, and it does not seem affected by wars in other realities. This place is truly special. I would love to see Games Workshop give us some more lore on this horrifying existence. Anyway, from one spooky to another spooky, let's take a look at Shadowpockets. There is a reason humanity has always been scared of the dark. The main Shadowpocket, also known as Eilendrach, is one of the far-flung corners of the Webway, one of the places where nightmarish entities lurk, a place of subconscious constant terror. Darkness in Eilendrach has gained a sort of sentience, and it is here where the mandrakes make their home. Mandrakes are creatures so vile that even the Drukhari fear them and dare not double-cross them. Yet what makes this place interesting is the unique ability of the mandrakes to pull themselves into reality from shadows alone. The Raven Guard and Night Lords have battled for millennia for who is the true master of the dark, but neither could ever compare to the mandrakes. Their inky skin writes with forbidden runes, and their faces shift and flow, one moment sealing over into an expressionless mask, and the next parting like a reopened wound filled with needle teeth. Mandrakes exist both in reality and their cursed otherworld, and to fight them is to fight a living shadow, for they are not fully corporeal. As their tangibility ebbs, shots pass harmlessly through them, though the same is not true of the mandrake's own attacks, which always land with visceral physicality. Here is a quick excerpt on how mandrakes use their Shadowpocket reality to hunt across planets, as seen in Sabbath Martyr. Scarwiel melted into shadow and doubled back. Like a phantom, he flowed through the shadows of a burned out hub and came out onto the street. Darkness swam about him, unnaturally extending his flesh cloak, bonding him to the night. Where are you? He wondered. The street was empty. Patchy fires burned in several buildings. The stiff corpses of Imperial soldiers decorated the ground. A wounded man, a PDF private, ran past him up the street, terrified, hoping to reach the towers before the gate hatch locked. The human didn't even see Scarwiel, even though he was standing in the middle of the road. The oblivious human passed so close by Scarwiel that he could have reached out with his knife and cut his throat. Still, that feeling. Scarwiel turned, became brick, became glass, became stone, shifting his visual form against the backdrop behind him. His unseen adversary was close by. He could feel it. His pallid skin prickled. Behind him, no, to the left. He passed through shadows and firelight, bending light and sound around himself as he moved. His chameleon powers brought him into walls and doorways, like a spectre from the afterlife. There, Scarwiel turned and flashed back through the night. At last, his peerless skills as a stalker had paid off. There was his adversary, huddled down behind a railing, trying to hide. The origins and exact abilities of the mandrakes remain mysterious. Some say they are unlight given form. Others whisper about Eldar engaging in dark union with unholy entities. Even the fire they strike with is something cold and truly foreign. Among the Drukhari, they are valuable tools of assassination. Whatever price is asked, it is always given. Whatever the mandrakes truly are, their Shadowpockets are a frighteningly efficient tool, with nothing quite able to challenge them, except for the Ghostwind of the Necron's flayed ones. But from one Xenos reality to another, let's take a look at the Great Green and the Wall Gates, my two favorite dimensions in 40k. Orcs believe in simple things. There is never enough Daka, fighting is the greatest thing ever, and that green is best. So there's the Great Green, which is, well, the Sea of Souls, but for orcs only. While many things are poorly understood by the Imperium, the Inquisition would learn about the Great Green directly from the Grot Makari, helper of the Great Gaskell Traka. It is a fungoid realm where Gork and Mork reside. It is the place an orc soul goes upon death. But unlike most other souls, orcs at times can be reincarnated, such as Makari. However, Makari also notes that the Great Green might also be something just stuck in the heads of the orcs instead of a real place. Yet he also admitted to not really understanding the universe and not knowing how to answer such questions. So while the existence of the Great Green is a bit doubtful, the same cannot be said for the War Gates. A Wall Gate is a piece of orc technology that the Imperium has only encountered once, during the War of the Beast. With this technology, the orcs could manipulate gravity and other forces of the universe at a fundamental level. Gates created what could only be described as a subspace tunnel. Something using the warp or something else related to subspace, through which the orcs could travel the galaxy with their attack moons. To do so comes at a cost, however, the first being that planets that run along the path of a gate suffer from gravity storms and anomalies around their region of space, which results in great damage or the outright destruction of these planets. The second is that the attack moon needs to gather a lot of power after such a jump through space. Yet the most terrifying feature of a gate are that they stay open inside the attack moon, allowing for supplies and reinforcements to arrive without any delay. During the War of the Beast, these attack moons could appear anywhere in the galaxy, destroying everything in their wake. Only through the most concentrated effort of the Imperium could the War of the Beast be won, after a lot of sacrifices from the Space Marines, Sisters of Silence, and even the death of Vulcan. But now I want to cover one of the weirdest dimensions in all of Warhammer 40k history, the Uncanny Crusade dimension. While we have covered dimensions created by some of the galaxy's biggest players, they are far from the only ones capable of creating such things. When High Marshal Helbrecht leads a crusade into the Ghoul Stars to destroy a dangerous Xenos race known as the Scythor, they run into an odd anomaly. An entire Xenos fleet was abandoned around a base in a gas giant. Helbrecht chooses to enter the base with a handful of his best warriors, including the Emperor's champion Bayard and the Forgemaster Jurisian. Here, they find a place that is bigger on the inside than on the outside, and so the High Marshal turns to Jurisian for his wisdom, as seen in the Uncanny Crusade. I do not believe the Scythor are entirely of our realm of existence, my liege. This is not the work of the warp. The geometries of the warp defy explanation of any kind. If anything, these dimensions here exhibit a greater complexity. Many of us have noticed the inconsistencies of the room here, the lack of match between exterior and interior. I have seen it for myself. Though complex, the dimensions of this place are explicable. This whole habitat is an expression of higher dimensional physics. Explain. The universe we exhibit comprises 4 dimensions: height, width, depth and time. These creatures are perhaps native of more. You speak of the warp. I do not. The warp is separate, unto itself, another realm entirely. There are more dimensions than the 4 in our own field of existence. It is through these that the entrance to the warp is affected, and how some of the greatest mysteries of the Adeptus Mechanicus are realized. But these dimensions are not of the warp. They are as real and physical as the heft of your sword, or the roundness of your bolts. I do not understand. Imagine, champion, that you lived in a world of 3 dimensions instead of our 4. Width, depth and time. You would have no concept at all of up or down, as there would be no height. It would appear perfectly normal to you, but that would not mean the height does not exist, only that you are incapable of perceiving it. So it is here. You speak in riddles. If such a place existed, I would be able to see it. I can see no flat world, and so it is not there. Do you speak of the greatest mysteries of the temples of Mars? It is not given to you or even me to understand them, but does that mean they do not exist? You posit then a creature that exists as a physical being, not a witch or demon born out of the warp, can create this? Yes, my lord, these new forms of the Scythor are as real as you or I, but possess further dimensionality to make them difficult for us to perceive. Forgive me, my lord, but I am unable to elucidate further. This field of study is the preserver of the greatest of the Magi of Mars. My only knowledge of it is practical and nothing more. Sadly, for all the zeal of the Black Templars, the Xenos Scythor managed to escape, and Helbrecht would take a penance for failing in his crusade. But this is not the weirdest reality in 40k. Let's take a look at one, created by a certain custodian, that has been missing for 10,000 years. Let's take a look at the City of Dust, the next and honestly very cool big plotline of Warhammer 40k. because this is what the Backwin books, Starchild and even Era of Ruin were honestly all about. The City of Dust has been a place pursued for many years by both Inquisitor Eisenhorn and Inquisitor Ravenor. The City of Dust is also referred to as the supposed dwelling of the King in Yellow. The King in Yellow was first thought to be a myth alongside the City of Dust, but in reality, it is perhaps the greatest threat to the Imperium, as this mysterious entity seeks to uncover the Emperor's true name. Which, if you didn't know, would give this person the ultimate power over the God Emperor and would even allow them to kill him. At first, it was thought to be a sub-realm created by an organization known as the Cognitae, so the Yellow King could go about his work unchallenged. So Eisenhorn, Ravenor and their agents have been trying to find a way into the City of Dust and stop the Yellow King from succeeding. Yet as seen in the novel Penitent, the agents of the Inquisition did not know what to expect when one of them, Backwin, managed to temporarily enter the City of Dust by accident. If this was the City of Dust, then it was not what Backwin expected. It seemed clean to the point of sterility. The air was warm, strong sunlight shone in through the pillared arches, casting long hard shadows of the columns across the floor, like the italicized numerals on the face of a clock. The quality of light was strange. It was so pure and fierce, and so directional. The hallway, like the chamber with the mirror, was tiled in amber. They held a rich inner warmth, glowing where the sunlight touched them. Backwin looked at the tiles on the wall beside her, again so perfectly fitted. Close to, she realized there was a mark upon them, a tiny pattern, repeated in delicate rows, across the surface of every single tile. It was the numeral 8, over and over again. Each one no bigger than the tip of a pencil, but the numerals were aligned on their sides, forming bands or chains. They were not 8s at all. They were the lemniscate, the geometric symbol for infinity. They were the limitless Aperion, the tail-biting double circle of the Ouroboros. This place was a palace, a great city of towers and domes, walls built for strong defense protecting it. How big was this palace, this city? 100 leagues across? 1,000? The mighty walls seemed so far away, yet Backwin could see them sharply, just like the innumerable stars. For the air was so clear and there was no light pollution. And there was no one there. The emptiness was eerie. Ravenor was wrong, Eisenhorn too. The King Door could have no mortal access to this place. They had not even begun to imagine the skill of the other side, for it wasn't a sea at all. The city was a great shining island, and the sea was the Immaterium, calmed and majestic, but as infinite and absolute as the Apeiron pattern on the amber tiles. Backwin had no idea why the great Empyrean wasn't washing her away, her and the place she stood in. Backwin had no idea how long she had been there. It will be alright. She looked up. A young man was standing over her, a look of concern and comfort on his face. He was wearing an austere white uniform that recalled the ceremonial dress of the Imperial battle fleet, topped by a rich blue robe etched in auramite thread. Upon his tunic breast, collar and sleeves, the repeated symbol of the lemniscate was embroidered in gold. Backwin could see complex tattoos upon his throat, and across the side and base of his shaved head, she knew his face. The man Backwin encountered was a blank. He tried to help her and acclimate her to what he called the Palace of Tamaizin. He was shocked to learn how little Backwin knew and intended to bring her to the custodian, suspecting her to be an intruder. Others began to arrive, wearing the faces of people Backwin once knew, and even some who had her own face. She began to feel ill, and when they tried to bring her before the custodians to be detained, she left the City of Dust by speaking in Nuncia, unwilling to harm the strange people. Soon after this, the Inquisitors learned the identity of the King in Yellow. It was Constantine Valdor, and that is where the story of the City of Dust ends for now, waiting for one final novel to be released. But we are not done just yet. There are 2 more dimensions that we need to cover. The first of which is the Forest, the mirror dimension that Lion L. Johnson uses to travel across the 42nd millennium. The Forest or Mirror Caliban is a unique realm adjacent to all dimensions, where only the Primarch Lion L. Johnson, the Watchers in the Dark, and the great beast he once hunted could roam. This mist-wreathed forest is so akin to an echo of Caliban of old, that it shocked the Primarch when he first saw it. Although he awoke in this strange place, he would come to master it as he journeyed through it, at some point capable of forest walking and striking a bloody vengeance against the servants of chaos. World by world and whisper by whisper, the legends of the Night of Nihilus began to grow, and people were filled with both fear and hope. The forest always manifests as the echo of long-dead Caliban. When used, it leaves undergrowth sprouting from ferrocrete and then withers away. Through the forest paths, the lion can travel from world to world. Sometimes, he even chooses to bring along some of his most trusted warriors. Such individuals are further sworn to absolute secrecy regarding what they witness during such supernatural journeys. The forest walking is still a skill the lion is mastering. Often enough, he ends up in the wrong world and only reaches his end goal after questing and fighting the servants of chaos. But we have one more source from the Dreadwing novella that implies that this power comes directly from the Watchers in the Dark, who on more than one occasion teleport people into the pocket dimension even before Caliban is destroyed, to have a personal conversation with them. Holgwyn stepped out of the ram and crunched on dead leaves. He looked down at his boot in shock. Dense forest surrounded him. Animals growled from their hiding places in knotholes and burrow lairs. Birds chirped, rustling the dark leaves as they circled the canopy in hunting flocks. "What is this?" He turned with bolter raised, but where he had expected to see the nose of Cestus, embedded in twisted cowling and spumes of vapor, there was nothing but a small figure. The inside pane of Holgwyn's visor creaked as it began to freeze over. "Watcher," he breathed, fogging the inside of his helmet. "What are you doing here?"
What are you doing here?
The Calibanite spirit repeated back at him. Holgwyn heard the words. He felt them. He remembered them as though they had been spoken to him before, long ago, and this visitation had called them back to his mind. They appeared in writing, repeated over and over in scrolling text on his slowly crystallizing screen.
The Ouroboros stirs. The last chance to save Caliban is now.
Holgwyn made to speak, but the Watcher was already gone. The forests of Caliban were gone. In their place, he faced Meulen and Castiel's primed weapons. Valiel, Brunor and Samariel plodded from the ramp to secure the passageway that they had rammed into. This is an interesting one, but currently, that is all we really know. The forest is never fully described, and we only have one official artwork that kinda shows what it looks like. Games Workshop, please make another novel with Lion forest walking everywhere. Maybe have him forest walk right to Gilliman, so the two can finally meet. But I have one more dimension. Or well, an example of a dimension that I want to share today. The Matrix in Warhammer 40K. Griffon 4 was a forge world that was once destroyed. The tech priests of Griffon 4 were an overly proud lot, and this destruction left them utterly crippled. While many died fighting, others had become beggars and refugees, seeking out aid from other forge worlds. Many tech priests could not handle such an insane loss, so what did they do? They created a new sphere replica of Griffon 4 and used up nearly all of their resources to do it. 50 high-ranking magi stayed in the false illusion of code, and to this day, it is unclear if they are still living in there. So, while not a real dimension, the Mechanicus is more than capable of rebuilding an entire world in a digital realm, where they can live as though nothing ever was lost. Now for the conclusion. Warhammer 40K is currently built on 10 general dimensions. The overworld, which is our reality. The warp, which is his mirror. Then we have the Ghostwind, which is the basement of our reality, and the Webway, which is a pathway realm connected between the warp and the universe. Then the Necron version of the Webway, but as storage units are the dimensional pockets. Then we have a couple of smaller dimensions, which are the Shadowpockets, from which mainly mandrakes strike, the Great Green, which is where all the good orcs go, the Uncanny Dimension, which is reality but very weird and very different, and then ending off, we have the City of Dust, possibly within the warp itself, and the Forest, which is adjacent to every other dimension in 40k. But what do you think of all of this? Which of the 10 dimensions we covered today is your favorite and why? If you could write a Warhammer 40k novella yourself, which dimensions would you use to tell your stories? Are there any other dimensions I missed in this video? Because I tried to search as far and wide as I could, but even then, new pieces of lore do sometimes fall through the cracks. Let me know your comments, concerns, suggestions, theories and ideas down in the comment section below. If you think I deserved it with this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps push this video into the algorithm and it would make me very happy. Thank you for watching and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.